Drama, absolute drama. That's what summarized the Sao Paulo GP. But there's so much more to that. There's so much more madness behind the drama. And that's the intention of today's episode on the Inside Line F1 podcast and Pits To Podium. And Kunal and I are going to dive down deep into this entire race. Lewis Hamilton's performance, Mercedes' engine decisions, what happened right there, is there favoritism from the FIA, how good was the race, how good were Ferrari and McLaren. Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot of stuff coming up right here on this episode of the Inside Line F1 podcast and Pits to Podium. Hey there, folks. Welcome back into the Inside Line F1 podcast and Pits to Podium. Finally, I'm back home, so that's a bit of a plus point. And what a race I was treated to. By the way, I just forgot. It's been a couple of minutes since this episode began, and we haven't quite introduced who we are. In case you don't know, my name is Soumil Arora. I think so, but I am the host of The Driving Force on Disney Plus Hotstar. So there's that. And I'm joined by Kunal Shah, the former marketing head of the Force India F1 team, and who currently works as the motorsport consultant at the VS Sport Network in Norway. And Kunal, from what I can tell, this just has to be one of the most dramatic F1 weekends. Necessary or unnecessary, all the drama, well, that's a different thing. But seriously, come on. Can you top that level from this one? I seriously think there's some fiesta, something about Sao Paulo that just makes it so awesome every year.
I think it's the track, it's the atmosphere, it's the history, it's all of that. And you said there was a lot of controversy, a lot of dramas, and we had that on track and off track. And that lethal combination is what is going to make people remember the Brazilian Grand Prix in 2021 or the Sao Paulo Grand Prix in 2021 for several years to come, right? Lewis Hamilton, Mercedes, 25 overtakes,
Wow.
0.2 millimeter difference in the DRS scrutineering, FIA, alleged favoritism by, Toto Wolff and Lewis Hamilton, Red Bull looking like they came up with a 2020 or 2019 car at the Brazilian Grand Prix. And I'm going to keep calling it Brazilian Grand Prix because, hey, that's to that. I think just incredible. And, Lewis Hamilton's pace and his attitude in Brazil in the race that we saw in the sprint and the Grand Prix is what will make Red Bull and Max Verstappen sit back and be like, what just happened there? 25 overtakes is unthinkable. Usually we say 2021 cars, you got to follow through people, you can't overtake, you follow closely, you damage your tires. Lewis said, to hell with all of that. I'm just going to drive the wheels of this car. And I think that attitude with which he attacked the weekend is what we will remember for a long, long time. And then, of course, for quiz masters like Sundaram and Nityanand and the likes, I'm sure at some point they'll ask, how many cars did Lewis Hamilton overtake in the 2021 Brazilian Grand Prix? And the correct answer would actually be 26 in my view, not 25, because he overtook Checo Perez, at the S's, and Checo Perez overtook him back, only for Hamilton to make the overtake again. So technically, it's 26, but I could be wrong. I don't know how Formula One does all the crypto.com calculations, Soumil.
It's ridiculous. More than 25. It has to be more than 25 because so many cars were passed more than, I think, once at least in that case. Just jaw-dropping. But let's put it into context now. Let's not waste any more time with previewing the race and all that's happened. I think the meat of the discussion is in this. And it's in the title as well. Just how scary is Hamilton's turn of pace? Because all of a sudden, right, he just comes out there, blows everybody apart. And strategically, Max as well later on, which is an interesting thing we shall discuss in a bit. But how does that happen? New engine, sudden bursts of pace. Of course, you have to rate this as one of Lewis's best driving performances of his entire career. And that says something considering how many good ones are there already. But still, car-wise, both of them seemed very equally matched. Driver-wise, both of them seem very equally matched at this stage. Just has to be something about the engine, no? What's going on in there?
Mercedes' engine strategy is extremely, extremely enchanting, right? And I'll spend a couple of minutes explaining that. in a couple of minutes, right? But the first thing what you asked Soumil was, should we be scared? Should Red Bull, Max Verstappen, should Formula One be scared? Because
Yeah.
3 races to go, 14 points. If Lewis just steamrolls his way through, we may not even have a title battle going down to the wire. And the fun part here to me, Soumil, is that each time we said this after Turkey, and then Red Bull
Yep.
bounced back in Austin, and now Brazil was supposed to be a Red Bull track, all and out, and suddenly Mercedes said, "That's it, we are a monster powered car, and we'll drive like a monster on what's supposed to be a Red Bull track." So in a way, it's good. Everybody's uh, preconceived notions are literally falling apart. Nobody knows what's actually happening. Mercedes, Red Bull, themselves being included, right? And so that by that logic, I'm guessing when we go to Qatar next weekend, we will probably be in a better position in terms of having a fight and taking it through. But that, I must say one thing. Let's assume Red Bull was the quickest car in Austin and Mexico, and then we've got Mercedes as the quickest car in Brazil, right? But each time, none of the teams actually could score a 1-2 finish because the other championship rival finished ahead of the number 2 driver, and that just shows the class of the two title rivals to me, Soumil, because Max and Lewis have been able to limit their championship damage, by finishing second to somebody else on a day when the car is not the quickest, and not finishing third, and so on. And to me, that really stands out because they've scored 11 1-2s this season, and I think the third race in a row when they've actually been a 1-2 irrespective of who's on the podium. And this is despite all the performance swings that we've seen through the season, Soumil, right? And so that's that. And then talking about Mercedes's engine strategy, I think the Mercedes engine degrades faster than the Red Bull power or Honda power. That's the reason why Mercedes is on like a fifth and a sixth engine, and they were trying things with Bottas a few races ago, and now they're implementing those things on Lewis's car. And I think that when they put in a new engine, they have a turn of pace, which is what scared everyone in Brazil, right? And then, of course, the temperature was a factor and balance and so on. But sticking purely to engine terms, I think Mercedes's engine strategy is definitely going to raise a few eyebrows because teams are encouraged within the rules to finish a season within 3 power units. But Mercedes is going all the way up to 5 and 6, which of course comes out of their budget and so on. And the irony here is if you take a 4th power unit, you get a 10-place grid penalty, or 4th ICE as we call it. You take a 5th one, you get a 5-place penalty. You take a 6th one, you get a 5-place penalty. So it should actually be inverse. The more you use, the more you go back, right? But that's probably the strategy. Just put on new engines, have this turn of pace, drop back 5 positions and still use the pace advantage to come up and, finish up the ranks. Of course, it's a very risky strategy, but you saw that it gave them rewards in Brazil. Reward was not just, winning the Grand Prix, but also having a fresher power unit they can push more in the next 3 races of the season, Soumil.
And Honda can't do that, because Honda is not quite in the mix. Honda's operation is actually over and done with. So that adds another layer of intrigue about whether this resource push from Mercedes towards the end can actually get them the title. Who knows how things are actually going to pan out in that sense. But it's tremendous how much a new engine can do. But that's one side of it. The human aspect of it, Kunal. Lewis Hamilton, it's been 9 minutes and we're now finally coming to his supernatural effort. How many? 27 overtakes? Which one of them was your favorite? Honestly, for me, it can't go past that Lando Norris overtake that he had right there in the sprint race. The way he just dove down in from Rio de Janeiro. I don't know. That's so far away. Lewis was on fire. And from a driving perspective, how would you rate this as one of his top performances? Because seriously, they're taking complete advantage of everything. The regulations, the car, their rivals maybe not doing so good on that particular day. This is just all out top class. Even though there were penalties added on, controversy added on, You just cannot fault him at all this weekend.
You can't. And, we'll talk about the controversies because that became a key talking point as well. But my favorite overtake was actually, I would say, his battle with Checo Perez. And then, of course, Max Verstappen, because with Verstappen, it's always a little over the edge. And the reason why I chose Perez and Verstappen is because I believe that, when when Lewis was fighting against the other cars, they knew Lewis's performance advantage, and literally nobody offered him as much of resistance as the two Red Bull drivers. And to me, the Perez overtake sort of stood out because Perez let him through on turn one, got the S's right, and got a better exit, and then DRS'd his way through. And that's not something you normally see Checo Perez do, but he's done it twice this season. He's showing that he's able to battle the might of Lewis Hamilton, especially when he's got things going. So that's what my pick would be. And you rightly point out, Soumil, that it's not just the engine. So if anybody thinks here that it was the engine that made the difference, God, no, please, it wasn't just the engine, right? It was down to the man machine that both of them delivered. And in some ways, Lewis's whole attitude this weekend was, somebody's doing wrong to me. I'm going to go out and do all my talking on track because I can't do the talking for obvious reasons. There's, governing body out there. And I don't know if he was done wrong with. We should sort of come to that. But there were two instances, maybe, okay, let's talk about that. There were two instances when he was probably done wrong with. And one of them is more on the sporting side of things, his whole battle with Max Verstappen into turn 4, how Verstappen took him out, went, and the FIA said no investigation necessary. And I think, yes, they let them race. That's a great thing. But I also think we have, several hundreds of examples of previous such battles where drivers have been penalized for far easier infractions or far more obvious or not so obvious infractions, I would say. So I think there could have, been a penalty coming in there. I think Max got just very lucky. And this is probably just going to push Lewis to believe even more so that somebody is working against him and Mercedes this season so that they don't end up winning titles. And they're not so, for once, they're not being diplomatic like Toto Wolff said. He said the diplomacy ends now, and he's being very, very direct in accusing, or at least not accusing, but in saying it very clearly that there is some favoritism that's being shown out here, Soumil.
I sort of get why the FIA did it, but then, as you rightly mentioned, there are instances where clearly they've given penalties for, let's say, less harsh incidents than that, right? I mean, Yuki Tsunoda got 2 penalty points on his license for what happened later on. Seriously, that's 2, and this isn't any. Again, that's just my thoughts, totally my opinion. But it's good that they let them race. But the bad thing is consistency again. Fernando Alonso will do that for us. We don't need to. A cheap link to the episode we did about him. Check that out when you can. After this one is done, of course, by the way. Don't leave us now, because the fun stuff comes up right here. But the controversy, Kunal. Toto Wolff. You mentioned Lewis was probably done wrong on the sporting side, and we've had a touch on that. But were they run down? Well, not run down, but were they done wrong on the technical side? Because clearly the rules are black and white, but what's up with Red Bull being allowed to run with the tape? And is it the FIA being a little two-faced over here, or are things as black and white as, of course, we normally perceive them to be in the world of Formula One?
I think in my limited understanding of technical regulations and scrutineering, I think it's fairly black and white what happened. And the key difference, and there are two differences that I'm going to state out here. Mercedes had a wing that did not meet the regulations by 0.02 mm. That's it. That is black and white. You do the test, and the test said Mercedes' wing opened 0.02 of a millimeter too much than it should have. And in the world of Formula One, that is enough for people to raise eyebrows, right? Of course, Mercedes turned around and then said that 0.2 mm was just on one side, which was basically, wear and tear that their rear wing assembly saw, right? And to my mind, that's a fair assessment as well. And Mercedes out here were expect from the FIA to say, yes, we can see that your wing has been damaged. Just correct your rear wing assembly, and we'll allow that under park Fermi regulations because we see that there is damage, right? But the qualifying statement here is that Mercedes actually failed the scrutineering, right? And what I urge everyone listening in to do at some point, and I put this out on Twitter as well, is have there been instances in the past where a team was allowed such a buffer? Because that's an example that's actually not come out in the open in the last 48 hours since the FIA made the decision to disqualify Lewis Hamilton. For example, was Red Bull or McLaren or Ferrari, were they given such a buffer when there was damage found during scrutineering, right? And talking about Red Bull's taping of the rear wings and stuff like that, they ran that in the session. The scrutineering is what happens after the session.
Correct.
So despite all the tapes and stuff like that, they still cleared scrutineering. The key word out here is you have to be able to clear scrutineering. When you do not clear scrutineering is when the scrutineers, and they are appointed by the FIA as well, are forced to try and are forced to act upon what they find. And that's how the sport has been policed all along. So the question is, I'm going to repeat myself, have other teams been given a buffer? If so, what are the examples, right? If there are no examples, I don't see why Mercedes was expecting a buffer out here to repair a damaged part. And citing Red Bull's example of taped rear wings doesn't make the cut because Red Bull used the tapes on the rear wing before scrutineering happens through a session or after a session, if I've not confused everyone too much.
So much screwed at the same time. I haven't heard that since I heard maybe a rapper's song or something like that. No, but that's one thing. But on a more serious note, I think it's this weird spot, right? But the rules are a bit black and white where Mercedes actually fell foul of it. But my word, I want to know more on that. I'm really intrigued by it. And honestly, I can't wait to see how that evolves as the days and weeks goes on, as you interact with us on social media as well, folks. So don't forget that. Wow. I am stumped. But let's actually move to strategy. That's one thing I'm not quite stumped about right now. And amazingly, Kunal, after all that's happened, the strategic battle between Red Bull and Mercedes was there as well. So it's not like this was just a one dimensional race where we just saw penalties or something like a reverse grid, but this element as well. And I loved how Max Verstappen was very prompt later on to say, I just do not want to get undercut. Maybe in hindsight, that was his failing because Hamilton, towards the end, going a little bit longer, had a little bit more grip. Your thoughts on that? Just the way things played out at the end. And maybe were Mercedes smarter or did Red Bull, I don't know, kick themselves in the foot by just boxing Max a bit earlier in the last case?
I think that was the only option that Red Bull had at that point because the Red Bull was tougher on its tire than the Mercedes is, and that's what came out of the post race calculations that people like Mark Hughes and all have written down, right? And had they not brought Max in when they did and sort of pulled a card on Mercedes, Mercedes would have actually undercut them at some point, right? So the only way Red Bull could have done that is by doing something unconventional, bring Max in early. They did this in Austin as well, put the pressure onto Mercedes to pit, create a gap, and then still find try and give them as few laps in the end to make the overtake, or rather try and give as few laps in the end for Max to defend against a faster Lewis Hamilton. So I think it was actually very good on strategy. They sort of caught Mercedes unawares because immediately when Mercedes reacted to Red Bull's pit stops, both the Mercedes drivers thought that the team had done wrong. And Bottas was actually like, we've done wrong. We've actually let go of an easy 1-2 finish. And maybe Mercedes would, in hindsight, when they do their post-race debrief and they release the video of it, might just agree with that. But I love the fact that Red Bull are being aggressive in strategy, especially in races when they know they might not have the edge on raw pace, Soumil.
And it's amazing how that battle eventually transpired with Lewis and Max having just a great street fight in a way. And that's what we all really love to watch. And eventually, Kunal, before we just head to the midfield, Valtteri Bottas, on the whole weekend. Winner of the sprint, by the way, which is great to see. But would you say he overperformed or did he underdeliver, all things considered? Because he lost pole position. Again, it might not have been a Valtteri Bottas win, mind you, because Lewis Hamilton, had he come along, they would have always given the team orders, which they did eventually. So credits to them for that one. But do you think P3 justifies his weekend, or was that just mistake at the start a bit too costly for him?
I think, Red Bull and Mercedes would be expecting P2 from their number two drivers each time the number one drivers are winning, because that's just the kind of pace the car has. But that also shows the gap between the number one and number two drivers in terms of natural talent, raw pace, performance, all of that. In my mind, I think Valtteri Bottas drove a fantastic weekend. He was able to be in the fight with Max. He took 1 point away from Max on Saturday, for example, when Lewis was, pulling off his overtaking masterclass. And, could Bottas have won if they had not swapped? Maybe, but, like you said, team orders would have anyway come into play. Bottas knew about it. Lewis knew about it. Mercedes knew about it. And I think Bottas in the end did what he had to, which was get onto the podium and outscore Red Bull with as many points as they can by finishing off Checo Perez.
Yeah, exactly. And towards the end, apparently they were trying to get hold of Max as well. Only 10 odd seconds the gap. Who would have known what would have happened? But what a good weekend on the whole. Yeah, what if he hadn't dropped the pole position? That's another thing to wonder. But another thing to ponder upon, Kunal, and this is something heading into the midfield. What's going on at McLaren? All of a sudden, all their goodwill, all their momentum, it's all just dripping down the drain. And Ferrari, again, power of numbers. Two cars constantly P5, P6. The gap between them was around 1 or 2 points a couple of weekends ago, if I remember correctly. 31 points now. That is outrageous.
That's outrageous. It was just unfortunate. Lando Norris opening lap, actually skirmish at the start with Carlos Sainz. That sort of ruined his race. Daniel Ricciardo, a power failure that sort of he had. It was just unfortunate. And I'm just reading the numbers. McLaren have scored 2 points in the last 2 races, whereas Ferrari has scored 37 points.
Yikes.
And I think that's incredible. I think this is now a lost cause unless McLaren get another 1-2 in the next 3 races, to me, Soumil. And I think Ferrari also did extremely well to get P5 and P6 with Charles and Carlos Sainz. Although Carlos Sainz wasn't the happiest because he believed that he was quicker than Leclerc. Just that Ferrari told him all through the race to not overtake Leclerc, and that's how. So he actually ended his official press conference line by saying, "A great Sunday for Ferrari, but not personally for me."
As has been the case for the last couple of weekends. Oh man, I wonder what 2022 will look like if Ferrari are competitive with these two guys at the forefront. But that's for 2022. Final couple of thoughts on this weekend, Kunal, on the midfield, on everything that happened. Things are just really lining up to be, I don't know, probably the best F1 finish in the last decade, maybe even better than 2012. Who knows how this stuff is going to go?
Yes, who knows? We had a sprint race. I think it was a phenomenal sprint race in every way. In a way, I'm glad we are going to go back to normal qualifying because my mind is still not accepting a sprint race as much as everyone else's. But all in all, I think it was a lovely weekend for Formula One. Another fantastic advertisement for Formula One, Soumil, because battle of the generations, battle between the two of the best teams and the FIA and the controversies and the penalties and all that coming in. I just have one question which is unanswered, which I'd love to open it up to everyone, saying, Max Verstappen was penalized 50,000 euros for touching his and Lewis Hamilton's car, right? What I want to know, and if anybody can get the FIA to answer this one, is how much was he penalized for touching his car, and how much of the 50,000 euros were a part of touching Lewis Hamilton's car? Because I would assume that touching a rival's car actually should cost you more money than touching your own car.
I'm sure Max touches his own car. I mean, while not in that sense, but how much of it was for the rear wing? What's the budget like for the front wing? Maybe if you can open up the hood and maybe see the engine, what's it like? I don't know. Might be a good investment, right, for someone like Aston Martin. Inspector Vettel coming along, maybe learning a few tricks for the team. Who knows? And he also had a word on that. But that's just the fun element of the weekend. And fun was the buzzword. And I hope you had that as well while listening in and while watching to this episode of the Inside Line F1 podcast and Pits to Podium. Next up is Qatar. So join us right there for that preview episode. We shall see you there and then. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. You know the deal if you like this episode. See you around in a bit. Bye bye.
Bye bye.